Hey, it's Pastor Jon here with Coram Church. Just want to take a few moments to respond to some of the text questions that we've got in from our current series called Marriage and. We'll read the first one here. It says, this weekend you spoke on sex pertaining to marriage. During that, you spoke briefly on Paul's words about sex outside of marriage in 1 Corinthians 6:16. My first question would be, what ramifications would there be for a person who is a victim of molestation or rape or made the choice to have sex before marriage? Also, what ramifications would it have on marriage for those people and their spouses? So, good question. That it needs to be clarified in order for the answer to be most helpful, because a person who has experienced molestation or rape has experienced is a victim in that sense, and that's not the same as somebody who chooses to have sex before marriage. So I don't want to say molestation, rape, and somebody who chose to have sex before marriage are the same thing. They're not. So let me speak to the rape and molestation issue. If that's something that somebody has experienced, that's not a willful choice that they made. That's a choice that somebody else made for them. And so my concern for somebody in that situation would only be, one, have they been able to work through those issues? Have they been able to really be cleansed and forgiven, not for their sin, but to be renewed for what they experienced from somebody else's sin? Have they been able to work through the bitterness and the anger that what they would have as being a victim? Were they able to work through that and to extend forgiveness to the person who did these things to them? That would be my concern. There would be no concern in terms of them committing adultery because they were molested or raped. So the concern would be, how are they doing? Are they healthy? Are they renewed? Have they gotten through that sense of defilement that those types of experiencing those types of things can bring? So that would be my concern for them. The other person is that you present as a person who made the choice to have sex before marriage, and the good news is that if we bring our sin to Jesus, the Bible tells us, John tells us, that He is faithful and He's just and He cleanses us from all sin. So we are cleansed from past sin. So that wouldn't be a disqualifying thing in terms of like you shouldn't be married because you had sex before marriage. But I would want to know. I'd want to know what that person had experienced. So a person who had sex before marriage and then gets married is in a different place than somebody who was habitually promiscuous, because you could be dealing with a pretty severe sexual addiction. And so the ramifications for somebody who is in the midst of a sexual addiction are going to be different than the person who had sex with one person before marriage, and part of that is because the way that sexual sin affects the individual. And so I'd need to know more. I need to know more about the person who was in that situation. And like I said, the good news is that there's forgiveness in Christ, there's renewal in Christ, there's redemption in Christ, and so we can certainly be forgiven. But I'd want to make sure that those past issues had been addressed. And then the other thing is that if that spouse was going to get married, what we do in the premarital counseling at Coram Church is we want to make sure that spouses are aware of past sexual history. And this comes partly from my own experience. When I got married, I wanted my, at that time, fiance to know about my past sin, because that was part of me, and I felt like I owed that to her, that if she was going to know who I am, she needed to know my story. And so it's just wise for people who are thinking about getting married to be very open and honest about their sexual history. And so we'd want to make sure that was brought into the light, and if there were any issues that needed to be addressed, any areas where there needed to be transformation, that we were able to do that. So that would be my concern. And then the third part of the question is, what ramifications would it have on marriage for those people and their spouses? I think it affects marriage in the context of honesty. So we're talking about a sin that was committed before two people were married. That's what I understand the question is speaking to. And so I think it'd be just like a couple that's wanting to get married, that we need to be honest with one another. We need to be honest about our sexual history and our past. so that we can be known, and so that we can be forgiven, and so that we can be loved. So I would want there to be honesty in the context of a marriage. I'd want a husband and wife to be honest about their past history. I would want there to be forgiveness extended and any healing that need to be taken place. Because if you have things that you're hiding in your marriage, those things are going to negatively affect the health of that marriage. You're going to not know if your spouse really loves you, because you know deep down inside that they don't really know you. And so you're going to be telling yourself, well, if they knew this, would they love me? And there's no relationship that can flourish in that type of an environment. So honesty. We want to bring it out for the sake of honesty, and we want to bring it out for the sake of forgiveness and cleansing and moving on and putting to death questions of what if. So those are, I think, the ramifications it would have on that. And so if this is a something that you're dealing with, I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Pastor Brandon or Pastor Derek, and we'd love to talk with you and walk through whatever specific things you have experienced, and try to be as helpful as we possibly can. So I hope that helps. I know the answer is a little bit vague, but the question was a little vague too. Feel free to send me an email, Jon@coramdalechurch.org, and I'd reply. All right, thanks a lot.